evaluating these projects, which is that we really want to look at them as projects that we would feel comfortable living with next to and in our own neighborhoods. That is something that the chair has been able to share in each of the proceedings that he's been able to attend in person. And so that is one of the things that I'm listening to you all speak about today, and also to our applicant share some more additional information. With that, I want to pass it to our public advisor, Ryan Young, who will provide more guidance on how to share your comments, either here in the room or online through this Zoom proceeding.
Good afternoon. I am not Ryan. I am filling in for him today. So I am Fabi Lau, Equity Outreach and Engagement Lead with the Office of the Public Advisor Energy Equity and Tribal Affairs on the Energy Commission. Today we will have some presentations, hear from government representatives, and then have a main public comment period. I just wanted to mention at the beginning of our time together that I will be sharing some instructions later today, and I will repeat again later. We ask everyone in the room who would like to make a comment to please turn in a blue card that you can find in the back in the public advisors table. And if you represent a government entity, whether it's local, state, federal legislature, or California Native American tribe, please also indicate that on the blue card. And now we'll pass the mic back to Casey.
Thank you, Patty. Can you move to the next slide, please? So one of the programs, as you've heard, we implement is the opt-in certification program. The goal of today's CEC meeting is to provide an opportunity for interested members of the public, including surrounding communities, to learn about the proposed project and our process. Your comments provided today or in writing to our proposed project docket will be considered for our staff assessment. I will kick it off by providing an overview of the opt-in certification program. Next slide, please. Through Assembly Bill 205, the opt-in certification program provides an optional permitting pathway and a condensed timeline for the types of energy facilities listed on the slide and certain transmission lines associated with these generating and storage facilities. Prior to the signing of AB 205, the CEC's permitting authority was limited to thermal power plants with a generating capacity of at least 50 megawatts. AB 205 expands the types of facilities that can be certified by the CEC to include energy storage systems of at least 200 megawatt hours, like the proposed Prairie reliability project. The opt-in process provides for early tribal consultation, robust public input, and rigorous environmental review. The CEC is a lead agency for the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and is charged with preparing the staff assessment, which includes the appropriate environmental document. In this case, CEC staff will be preparing a draft environmental impact report, or EIR. We will discuss the contents later in the presentation. Next slide, please. We don't do this alone. We consult with our state partner agencies, including the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the State Water Resources Control Board, and the applicable Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the Department of Toxic Substances Control. We are also coordinating with local agencies such as Los Angeles County. Next slide, please. CEC certification or approval of an opt-in application requires the CEC find that the construction or operation of the proposed project will have an overall net positive economic benefit to the local government that would have had permitting authority over the site and related facility. With the passage of Senate Bill 254, there is a rebuttable presumption that the project will provide an overall net positive economic benefit. The CEC must also find that the applicant has entered into one or more legally binding and enforceable agreements with or that benefit a coalition of one or more community-based organizations. At the stage of application completion, where we are now with the Prairie Reliability Project, the applicant submitted the required community benefits plan in its application, which included a timeline for execution. An actual community benefits agreement is not necessary for application completion, but the applicant must provide additional information updating or supplementing the information in the application no later than 45 days after an application is deemed complete. On February 2nd, 2026, the applicant submitted a community benefits agreement to the docket, which is currently being reviewed. The CEC must also find that the applicant will use a skilled and trained workforce and pay construction workers at least prevailing wages, subject subject to statutory enforcement or a project labor agreement. Any significant effects of the project must be avoided or substantially lessened, or the CEC must adopt a statement of overriding considerations for significant effects found infeasible to avoid or mitigate. The list of requirements is not exhaustive, and based on the project, other requirements may apply. Next slide, please. This slide shows the timeline for our process. This application was deemed complete on January 30th, 2026, which started our 270-day schedule. And today we are hosting the informational and environmental scoping meeting. We are actively working on the staff assessment, which includes a draft environmental impact report, or EIR, working towards day 150, the day we are to file the document. We will then host a public meeting on the staff assessment 30 to 60 days after filing. The updated staff assessment will be published at least 30 days prior to a publicly noticed CEC business meeting at which the CEC will render its decision. And that is to be no later than 270 days after the application is deemed complete or as soon as practicable thereafter. Next slide, please. We want to mention that our work does not stop at day 270. If the proposed project is approved by the CEC, the project then goes to our Compliance, Monitoring, and Enforcement Unit, who ensures the facilities comply with all provisions in their associated certification. They also analyze any proposed changes to the design, operation, or performance. The team performs both formal inspections and unannounced inspections, reviews monthly and annual compliance reports, and investigates complaints. Next slide, please. For more information about the opt-in program, please visit our webpage. I will now invite the applicant representative, Garrett Lehman, for their presentation of the proposed Prairie Song Reliability Project.
And while we wait for Garrett, this is Commissioner Arietta. I wanted to let folks in the back know there's still seats up front here. If you do want to take a seat, this would be a good time to come over. You're not in trouble sitting up in the front. Garrett, if you could wait till, just make sure it's me. Any other takers? Oh, I don't want to force anyone. Okay, there's still doors here.
Good afternoon. I wasn't sure it was going to come. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Garrett Lehman. I serve as the Director of Development of Cobalt Infrastructure, and I bring over 15 years of hazard analysis and renewable energy development to California. I'd like to thank Lead Commissioner Gallardo, the CEC staff, and the public for joining us today to review the CEC application for the Prairie Song Reliability Project. Next slide, please. Before discussing project specifics, I'd like to speak a little bit about who Cobalt is. Cobalt is a long-term owner and operator of large grid interconnected infrastructure. Our mission is to strengthen the grid while bringing down costs for everyday ratepayers. How we execute on that mission matters. Safety is our first priority. It guides how we design our facilities, train our teams, work with first responders, and operate our projects every day. We apply rigorous engineering standards, build in multiple layers of protection, and hold ourselves accountable to continuous improvement. Equally important is our commitment to the communities where we operate. We believe the right approach is to listen, engage directly at the right time, and be transparent about projects' benefits and impacts. As we move through the presentation today, I'd like to reinforce that this isn't just a project for this community, but it's a project for the entire state. Prairie Song will benefit every Californian and help the state meet its growing electricity, carbon reduction, and reliability goals. Next slide, please. I'd like to briefly take a moment to ground us in the Prairie Song project and why it matters. Prairie Song is a standalone battery energy storage facility that will utilize lithium iron phosphate technology, or LFP battery chemistry, which is widely regarded as one of the safest and most stable battery chemistries. The system will be containerized with layered fire protection, suppression, thermal management, ventilation systems built in. Safety is engineered to the project from the onset. And from the outset, it must meet stringent building, fire, electrical, and operational standards. Beyond grid reliability, the project will provide measurable benefits to the local residents, Los Angeles County, and the state. We are committed to a just transition. The move to cleaner energy creates real opportunities for working families. That's why we're proud to stand here today with our union brothers and sisters with a project labor agreement already signed. This project labor agreement will help ensure family-sustaining wages, strong safety protection for workers, and clear pathways into the skilled trades. In addition, we're also very proud of the community benefits agreement we have with the LA Orange County Building and Construction Trades Council and women in non-traditional employment roles. This partnership expands meaningful access for women entering and advancing in union training programs and supports a more inclusive workforce. At its core, Prairie Song is about meeting growing electricity demand responsibly in a manner that prioritizes safety and delivers lasting benefits to the community. If you look at the slide, the project is located roughly 3 miles from the commercial center of Acton and about as near to the Vincent substation as you can get. That's a deliberate decision, and we'll talk about it more on the next slide. So it's important to address the fundamental question of why here. And the Vincent substation is a key node on California's transmission system. As a 500 kV substation, it's one of the few places that can accommodate a project of this size without the need for miles of new transmission upgrades, large substation build-outs. Avoiding these types of upgrades limits land disturbance, reduces environmental impacts, avoids added cost to ratepayers, and reduces time to operation to help these types of projects meet the grid when it is needed. From a reliability perspective, Vincent is ideally located to move renewable energy in from the Central Valley and the eastern portions of the state to various load pockets. It also, what that means in practical terms, is it allows energy that's generated during the day to be produced, stored, and used when it is needed, where it is needed. We all recognize that this area requires careful attention to safety and land management, and the project has been designed with that reality in mind. Prairie Song will incorporate defensible space, vegetation management, non-combustible materials, on-site water supply, and advanced fire detection and suppression systems into its design. Because we've chosen to go down a CEC permitting path, it also means we must work closely with multiple regulatory agencies, the Commission, local fire authorities, and relevant state agencies to ensure emergency response planning and operational protocols are aligned before operations begin. We're also committing to continuous reviews, trainings, and inspections during operations. These measures are intended to reduce risk, strengthen preparedness, and ensure the facility operates responsibly within its surrounding environment. Next slide. It's important to address, projects like Prairie Song are necessary to meet the growing economy and evolving electricity demands. California will need approximately 52,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2045 to help keep the lights on and houses cool. The state's already brought on 17,000 megawatts, and that's commendable. But as you can see from the first graphic, there's still a long way to go to meet that need. By 2045, electricity demand is expected to increase by more than 50%. That growth is occurring alongside a planned 7,000 to 10,000 megawatts of natural gas capacity retirement. All this does is accelerate demand while reducing existing capacity resources. That makes the need for projects that can come online quickly even more important. This unmet need carries real consequences for California families, businesses, hospitals, school, and care facilities that depend on a system that must perform, especially when temperatures are hottest demand is highest and communities are most vulnerable. Recent experience underscores what's at stake. During the record heat events of the summer of 2024, batteries provided 20% of the capacity at peak demand, helping to stabilize the grid and avoid outages. Not only did batteries show up to meet demand, but also no flex alerts or calls for energy conservation were issued to residents that summer. Projects like Prairie are not optional additions. They're essential infrastructure needed to protect people, strengthen an aging system, and ensure reliability as the grid grows and transitions to a cleaner future. Next slide. Battery safety is one of the most important questions surrounding this project, particularly in a community that lives with wildfire risk. The concern is legitimate and it deserves a response. If you look at the first graphic, it reflects global experience. From 2018 to 2024, battery deployment increased tenfold, all while incident rates dropped precipitously. 2024 showed record deployment, although incident rates remained at some of their lowest. The second graphic puts the scale in context for California. In 2019, California had 1 gigawatt of battery storage online. By 2025, that had risen to 17 gigawatts, a 15-fold increase in just 6 years. But if you notice the red line at the bottom, incidents have not been increasing. The reason for that are key best practices have been established, standards have tightened, fire codes have strengthened, and system design requirements have advanced. The industry operates today under far more rigorous regulatory requirements than it did even 1 year ago, including new standards signed into law by Governor Newsom in 2025 and expanded reporting and regulatory requirements implemented by the California Public Utilities Commission. Speaking to the third graphic, energy storage systems are everywhere at all scales, residential, commercial, utility. We're already seeing battery storage across the state, even in areas that are designated as high and very high wildfire hazard severity zones. That reality doesn't lessen the scrutiny applied to these projects, it increases it. This project is proposed in a very high fire hazard severity zone, and the review before the commission, the siting analysis, engineering design, fire protection systems, and operational protocols in the project will all address that fire designation. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a minute to emphasize the level of technical analysis that has gone into this project and is continuing through the CEC certification process. As we move forward, Prairie will continue to undergo a comprehensive set of environmental, engineering, and safety studies. The depth of this review extends well beyond your typical environmental assessment and reflects the seriousness with which potential impacts and safety concerns are being evaluated. Regarding public health specifically, multiple plume dispersion studies were conducted that exceeded burn scenarios experienced in typical UL 9540A and large-scale burn tests. An expanded toxic air contaminant analysis was also completed at the request of the CEC. These analyses evaluated worst-case thermal runaway behavior, heat release weights, radiant heat at property boundaries, container spacing, fire duration, and plume constituents. Under conservative modeling assumptions, the results indicate that exposures remain well within health-based protective thresholds at neighboring properties. To reduce operational risk, the project has prepared a community risk assessment, a hazard mitigation analysis, and an emergency response plan. In addition, the design is going to be subject to an alternative materials and methods review framework, which applies a heightened technical standard to fire protection and system configuration. From a wildfire resiliency standpoint, the site is relatively flat and bound by existing infrastructure corridors that function as natural fire breaks. The layout incorporates setbacks that exceed standard requirements and includes 2 sources of defensible water as part of the project design. Engineered container design, integrated fire response systems, and operational protocols are structured to contain potential events and prevent off-site impacts. The takeaway here is important. Safety is not a single feature. It is a result of layered engineering controls, detailed technical studies, regulatory reviews, and disciplined operational planning. Slide. At Koval, community partnership is core to who we are. When we build, we commit to showing up for the long term in places where our projects operate. Our focus is on what matters, and that means listening carefully and aligning our investments with the priorities identified by the residents and local leaders. One focus is wildfire preparedness and grid resiliency. In practical terms, that means helping the community better withstand encroaching fire and recover from power outages. We're exploring partnerships that expand access to backup power resources for critical facilities and trusted community locations. We're also prioritizing workforce development, particularly expanding access to high-quality careers in the skilled trades. That includes support for women entering union, apprenticeship, and trade readiness programs, veterans transitioning to civilian careers, and pathways to family-sustaining local jobs. We're proud to have our community benefits agreement in place to support women in the trades, and we see that as the beginning of deeper local engagement. In addition, we're committing resources to early childhood education, K-12 enrichment, wildfire resiliency, and conservation. These are long-term investments that support opportunity, economic mobility, and resilience across generations. Now, I'd like to hand the mic over to an active hazardous materials firefighter representing Fire to Mist Reliance, a national recognized fire protection engineering firm with extensive experience in battery energy storage systems. Matt.
Thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Matt Quinn, and I'm here today as a fire safety consultant. My own experience comes from the fire service. I've been over 20 years as a firefighter, fire officer, chief officer, and my perspective in the battery energy storage field, which is my expertise now, is very much from the emergency response perspective. And it also aligns well with my own educational background, my degrees in chemical engineering, and my graduate degrees in public policy. So this has been the area that a lot of my efforts have come in. And we can go, it is a fairly complex thing going on. Garrett mentioned that there's a lot of advancements that have happened recently. He mentioned there's a lot of layered redundancies and safety features that come on in these sites, and he's absolutely right. But what I'm going to talk about is the two that are most critical and will kind of set a site like we have here apart from things that we've seen in the past and are most important to understand. Next slide. Good. So, from the response perspective, the biggest difference with an energy storage system or any battery is it an indoor or outdoor system. This is important because when a battery fails, when there is a problem with a battery, it produces flammable gas. It off-gases and produces flammable gases that are very buoyant and like to dissipate. If it's outdoors, this is much less of a problem because it can dissipate and we know what we're looking for. It becomes more complicated when it's indoors. It becomes very complex. And in the past, we've learned when things have gone poorly that explosion could be possible if these things are inside buildings. So it's not something we do very much anymore. And this is what it looks like on the left there, that indoor BESS. Inside that shed there's a bunch of batteries inside. Now, what we have here, this is an outdoor BES system. It looks like on the right. And instead of having a bunch of batteries inside one large container or one large building, what we have is batteries contained in smaller containers. And I'll show you what those look like on the next slide. And this is important because each container, all it is inside is batteries. So there's nowhere to walk inside. So it's a system of smaller batteries that are combined to increase their energy storage. You don't just make a bigger battery, you make a system of smaller batteries that are combined. So the basic thing that you have is a cell. That is the building block of all the batteries, just like the batteries we have at home. Just like those batteries, they're very different in a way, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But when you have one building block is a cell, you combine them together and you can have a module about yay big. A bunch of modules get combined together and you can have a rack. And what we see inside this container, it's about 20 feet long, is just a bunch of these batteries that are connected together. They're connected together in a very sophisticated way, which is important. Each cell has cell-level analytics and 24/7 monitoring. So there's a battery management system. This is the term that you'll hear that's very important, the BMS. It's remotely monitored, computerized system that can see exactly what's going on in each one of these cells inside these containers. That becomes critically important for responding firefighters and for identifying problems that could happen. That's what it looks like inside each enclosure, okay? The next slide. I only have a small time frame, General, I will go much longer, but I want to make sure that I hit the important things. The idea that it's an outdoor system, very important. The other important component is the battery chemistry. And this is a little bit less straightforward because these are lithium-ion batteries. But there are multiple flavors, many different flavors, we'll call them, of lithium-ion batteries, okay? Garrett mentioned, these are LFP batteries. LFP stands for lithium iron phosphate. It's annoying, the F is for iron, right? Okay. What is more common in our everyday world that we'll see in our smaller, in our power tools, in our e-bikes, even our EVs, is the one on the left, nickel, manganese, cobalt. This is more common because it packs a little bit more punch, there's more energy in there. So as a result, it's a little bit more fire reactive. It is still unlikely to fail, but it maybe is a little bit more likely. Okay? What's important here is that it has those three elements, nickel, manganese, and cobalt, are all actually contained inside this battery. Okay? Older systems would be predominantly NMC batteries. Smaller systems, predominantly NMC. What we have is LFP batteries, and that's the state of the art. They are more fire safe, though they are a little bit less efficient from their storage standpoint, but it has huge environmental impacts as well. So when we look at, actually we'll go to the next slide, because I illustrated it perfectly. When we look at things that have happened in the past, the fact that it's an NMC battery becomes hugely significant as it impacts the environment. And those two dynamics that I just talked about are the key differences that separate this from the situation that we're most familiar with, this Moss Landing DES fire. This was an outlying setup that would not exist today. It came into existence before modern standards and safeguards were in place, as Garrett kind of referenced. If you take a look at it, I don't know if you guys can see, it was in a large, pre-existing, it was a natural gas-fed power facility, and they just filled it up with batteries on the inside. A huge building that was just filled with a bunch of batteries. So when there was a failure, there was no compartmentalization like we have here. It would move from one to the next. It was sprinkler systems involved there as well, which is another dynamic. But it was an indoor system, very different than the outdoor system we have. It was also an NMC battery system, which has environmental impacts because those elements, those heavy metals, which are the concern that existed in there, were released into the environment, and studies are ongoing to see the impact it's had on the local wetlands. And those chemicals, nickel, manganese, and cobalt, are not present in LFP battery chemistry, which is hugely important. So even if there is an issue with an LFP battery, those heavy metals are not produced. Next slide. So, the things that are produced, and I'll come back to what those numbers on top mean, but when one of these batteries does fail, we know what is produced. The vast majority of it are the things that are produced out of the fires. It's carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and hydrogen gas. So we know what we have, and I know the fire chief is here, so we can talk about how that will inform our emergency response because we know what we're looking for. The vast majority are those very light gases which dissipate readily. Also, there can be trace other types of gases. We have on the bottom there, and HF, HC, potentially toxic gases are produced here. What's interesting is those things that are produced aren't necessarily integral components of the batteries. They're kind of in everything. So what you're seeing is that component of what's being produced in these batteries is the same as in residential fires. So what you're seeing in house fires, those same toxic chemicals are produced. And if you have like one of the more, like a Home Depot fire or a large commercial fire, there could be even more of these things. So it's important that we know what's there and what's not there as we kind of dig into the emergency response side of things. The last thing I'm going to say is, it says here UL 9540A testing. All of these now, as Gary mentioned, there's heightened standards that exist now, one of which is a live fire test. They set them on fire and take all the readings to see what's going on. And that is going to very much informing what our response procedures are. He also referenced that these are designed to consume themselves. If there is a problem because it's modular and there's one on fire, they're designed such that it won't spread to the next one. They're designed that if it burns right there and it won't go further. And there are redundant safety features in where if one doesn't work, the next one will work. And that is the importance of having such a layered system. And I know the fire department's here, so they'll speak to their own plan on it. But hopefully I didn't go too long.
Thank you, Matt. And just before we wrap up, I'd like to mention there's a sign-up sheet in the back. If you'd like to provide your contact information and reach out directly or get any information about the project, please sign up and we can communicate. Thank you.
Garrett, before you depart from the podium there, I did have just a couple of questions for clarification.
Absolutely.
That I think might also be helpful to the public. Can you give us the estimate of the number of batteries that would be used for the project?
No.
Okay.
I can tell
I
you.
know that's difficult to do sometimes.
Right now, there are approximately 2,035 containers at the end of life for this project. I believe each container will have roughly 4,922 cells in it. But I don't know the total number of cells on the top of my head.
No problem. And then the number of years for the life of the project?
The life of the project is expected to be over 40 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gallo.
Just hold it for 2 seconds.
Alrighty, thank you Garrett for that, and thank you Commissioner Gallardo. My name is Lisa Worrell, and I'm the project manager for the CEC for this Prairie reliability project. I will cover the CEC's presentation on the staff assessment for the proposed project. I'd like to make a couple of points up front. Firstly, although we're engaged in this data completeness review of the application with the applicant, CEC staff analysis is in the early stages. That's why we're here today, engaged with the public, to get public scoping efforts and hear your comments and concerns. As part of staff's independent information gathering, we are looking for input on the scope of what our CEQA analysis should contain. Secondly, while this is an accelerated process, a complete and independent environmental analysis will be conducted. Next slide, please. The CEC has an interdisciplinary team of technical specialists who will prepare a staff assessment. A staff assessment is an independent technical and environmental review prepared by the CEC that is more comprehensive than a typical environmental impact report, or EIR. The staff assessment includes a draft EIR following the requirements of CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, and CEQA guidelines. We will later show the topics in the environmental and engineering impact analysis, some mandatory opt-in requirements that are included in the staff assessment. The staff assessment includes an environmental justice analysis of the proposed project's impact on environmental justice population, and this is based on the presence of a minority or low-income population, and considers whether the proposed project would have a disproportionately high or adverse human health or environmental effect on that population. And finally, the staff assessment will include a compliance, conditions, and compliance monitoring plan. This is to ensure that should the project be approved, construction, operation, and decommissioning complies with all conditions of the certification. Next slide, please. The purpose of a staff assessment is to provide objective information regarding proposed projects' significant effects on the environment, identify possible ways to minimize the significant effects, describe a range of reasonable alternatives to the proposed project, their feasibility, and their comparative merit, and also provide an evaluation of the extent to which the application complies with additional licensing requirements set forth in the Public Resources Code. This information will be considered by the CEC commissioners in deciding whether to grant a certificate to build and operate the proposed project. Next slide, please. These are the topics that our CEC technical engineers and environmental specialists are analyzing to produce a staff assessment. The topics incorporate those in Appendix G in the environmental checklist of the CEQA guidelines and include other topics required by the Public Resources Code. The staff assessment will also evaluate a range of reasonable alternatives to the proposed project. In addition to a no project alternative, the staff assessment will consider alternatives that would avoid or substantially lessen the proposed project's significant effects while feasibly attaining most of the proposed project objectives. Next slide, please. The staff assessment will also include an evaluation of the proposed project's compliance with mandatory opt-in requirements, which will include a skilled workforce requirement and a community benefits agreement. Mandatory opt-in requirements are not limited to those listed here on the slide and can be found in the California Code of Regulations, Title 20, Section 1879. Next slide, please. The CEC sent a notice of preparation, or NOP, of a draft EIR for the Prairie Song Reliability Project to the State Clearinghouse, also known as the Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, or LCI, mailed the NOP to responsible and trustee agencies, and filed a copy with the Los Angeles County Clerk. We also posted the NOP to the project docket, and it is available for review at the docket. Based on preliminary review of the application materials, the NOP identifies several topic areas with probable environmental effects that will be evaluated further in the EIR. However, since we are still early on in the analysis, additional environmental effects may be identified as staff conducts a comprehensive environmental review. The following slides identify some key topics for analysis in the EIR that staff has identified thus far. These topics include biological resources and worker safety, fire protection, which includes battery safety. Next slide, please. CEC staff receive email updates when new files are posted to the project docket and are reviewing the files on a regular basis as they come in. To date, the CEC has received over 160 comment letters on this project. This slide represents some of the known areas of questions and interests raised by the public based on comments received to date. This includes questions about fire, thermal runaway, battery energy storage, system safety, toxic air emissions, conflicts with local land use designations, and proximity to homes, transportations, corridors, and water supply. Staff uses comments to help develop the scope and content of the environmental document and learn about the areas of potential concern within each resource topic. Next slide, please. However, I believe we may be pausing for a break. So yes, next slide.
All right, we will be taking a